Mark Oliva is the Director of Public Affairs for the National Shooting Sports Foundation, NSSF, and he joins me now to discuss this issue and others. Mark, it's good to see you. So I was looking back at some of the back and forth. So much of this is procedural, and I get that people get lost in the weeds on all of the procedural moves, but essentially it was sort of like a last-minute poison pill that really has no bearing on this, and it has to deal with military protocol and whether or not, you know, someone who is serving armed forces, if they could be red flagged. But it's weird because from everything that I was reading of this, this is a civil issue. But why? But it's being treated as a criminal issue, but it was a civil issue. And you already have so many things on the books that already address this. I mean, I've written about civil commitments for years now. I wanted to get your reaction to this, and then we'll get to the potential where it could go from the Senate.
Yeah, Dana, thanks again for having us. So it's great to talk to you again. It really is a nonsensical amendment that was slipped into the bill. It's the way it's written doesn't really seem to make sense. I served 25 years in the Marine Corps. I'm not unfamiliar with the Uniform Code of Military Justice and how it works. The idea of having the red flag with the National Shooting Sports Foundation isn't against red flags, but what we are concerned about is due process concerns, and those don't seem to be safeguarded in this. And especially when you're talking about people in the military, people in uniform, you're already giving up a lot of your personal rights for the privilege to be able to serve your nation. When I served, I had to give up parts of my freedom of speech. I had to give up parts of my freedom of movement. I had to make sure that my family was going to be safe when we were moving around all the time. I had to give up some of my gun rights when I was stationed in California. I couldn't buy the AR-15 that I wanted. I had to wait until I was moved out of California to do that. So when we see bills like this going through, it's exactly what you said. It's a poison pill, and probably the best thing about it is it does have to go through the Senate, and there's probably a very good likelihood that the Senate will strip it out.
Yeah, I can't see, especially when it's so close as it is now, and it feels like the Democrats are kind of fighting with each other. I can't see. Manchin might be able to go either way, but I don't see him doing that at this point. But I mean, not to get into the weeds with that, but the Senate's way more sensitive to this with the makeup of the Senate right now than the House is. But that's the thing. I mean, because my issue with red flag laws has been I've not seen one written so far that has touched an area where we have law that already covers it, while protecting our constitutional rights. And I know this was like this ex parte process, meaning it could all be done without you even being present. And maybe, I know some of these states have red flag laws where you're not even notified until someone knocks on your door. That's a super dangerous thing. But as you said, military code of conduct, why is something like this even needed? Because like you said, you had to give up a bunch of stuff when you served, and we appreciate your service. So this kind of stuff, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, this is kind of already covered.
It really is. And there are laws, even before red flag laws started to be introduced in the states, that there were mechanisms to be able to intercede. Some of the red flag laws lowered the threshold to do that. Really what this seems to be is a point of order and trying to make a point. And you see this with the parties that try to reach into the military and use the military as a pawn for their pet projects. And that's why the National Defense Authorization Act tends to get so many amendments. It's one of the bills that has to be passed by Congress every year. They have to push it through, and we saw that there were nearly 1,000 amendments that were made just in order, not just the ones that were submitted. There were hundreds that were kicked out that weren't considered part of the defense authorization bill, but this one was allowed to go through, and this part of it was. So we're very closely keeping an eye on it because, like you said, the due process rights are really where the rubber meets the road. Do you have the ability to see the evidence that's presented against you? Do you have the ability to refute that evidence? Are they allowing people to bring evidence in front of an authority without you being in there? That ex parte is very dangerous and very worrisome for.
You know, the thing I've always been worried about most is the way that some of our lawmakers on the other side of the aisle from us where it concerns 2A activities, how these folks want to go after manufacturers, and they want to try to modify marketing and advertising rules and really kind of twist that all around so that you can just open a Pandora's box and start going after manufacturers who that to me, that's a variable, whether it's a firearm, whether it's a Tide Pod. Didn't we just have a whole story 2 years ago about people eating Tide Pods? Is Tide going to be held responsible? I mean, I'm not trying to diminish the severity of anything, but you see where I'm going with this? Like that, the whole fight to go after firearms manufacturers, this is kind of, it's kind of similar. It's just one of those things. I've been more worried about that really quickly. Where are we on that front? I know there's been a lot of litigation.
Yeah, we continue to uphold the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. And what that law basically says is that you can't come back and sue the firearm industry for selling a legal product, a lawful product, to a law abiding citizen who's passed the background checks. You can't hold the firearm manufacturer or the retailer responsible for the criminal actions of a non associated third party. Now, what we've seen up in New York State, we've obviously seen that Governor Cuomo, before he was booted out of office, he signed into law a bill that would basically go around the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. Well, that's going to be a day that's going to wait for itself in court, because the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act is still there. So now you're going to have state law that's in conflict with federal law. And we watched that Joe Biden stood there in the Rose Garden ceremony the day he introduced David Chipman as his nominee to be the ATF director. Mm-hmm. He stood there and he prayed to God that if he could have a prayerful wishing well, I guess, that he would get this one wish, this one prayer, that he would repeal the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. And it's interesting that he wanted to come after the industry, but he never talks about going after the criminals who are actually committing these crimes. And that's where we always point back to is hold those who are responsible for committing the crimes, hold them responsible for their actions, put them in jail, and start enacting the laws that you have on the books.